everybody. Thank you. Thank you. I think we'll start as we've got a lot to get through. So firstly, let me begin proceedings just by thanking everybody for attending. It's a really good audience. It looks as though it's pretty much standing room only. Looks as though there's a really good mixture of finance office people per se and also wider university staff. So that's really good. This is the fourth town hall now that we've had a presentation. Previously it was about employee, then about recruit, and then about work tribe. But as you know, this is going to be about finance. And essentially it's going to look at expenses and requisitioning. And these are two activities within the new Oracle system that actually will be applicable to everybody. And so do tell your friends about it, do invite us to give presentations locally if that's what you want, because we're willing to spread the word. We've recently started having high-level meetings with the directors of operation so that they are becoming very familiar with the way things are going to change, the way we're going to have new ways of working. So it's very important that you start spreading the word. It's very important that you come to these new call meetings. Just to reiterate that we've obviously taken a lot of this stuff to UEB. UEB are very aware of the way we're going to have different ways of working. And it has been agreed that these are mandatory changes. So, you know, people will have to comply with the new ways of working because clearly user adoption is really important to make this a really good system. I'm going to, Mike, I'll introduce you to Mike Dean, who's, many of you will know, but Mike's the Finance Workstream Lead, so he's been working on this for 2 years now, Mike?
2.5.
2.5 years, so he's well versed with it. He's also got his team of lovely finance people in the front, and once he's done his presentation, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. As I say, he's got his team of experts here, and so I'm sure between us we will be able to answer all of your questions. If we can't, if it's something that's come in from left field, we'll take it away and we'll make sure that we update our FAQs on the website and respond to you personally with any queries that we couldn't answer. But I'm absolutely sure that the team will be able to answer them. Just to let you know that this is being recorded. I don't think it's going to record any of your faces, so you don't need to worry about that. But we would like to try and capture the questions, and then this will be on the intranet afterwards. And I think there's going to be some roving mics around the place to capture your questions so that everybody can hear it. Okay, so we've got a lot to get through, so I'll pass you over to Mike.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. There are a lot of you here, aren't there? Which is extremely good. Just very quick intro from me over and above what's on the slide there. Probably key from the bottom there is that in terms of the demonstration, and I'm about to do a demonstration from our test system that we've been using for the last few weeks. There's no live data in there, so no one's identity or personal data should be compromised in terms of what I'm going to do for the next half an hour or so. And just to say that we are obviously testing, and so inevitably that testing is driving out things that aren't quite right, and so look and feel of what I'm about to show you may look different by the time we get to February. Charlotte's kindly pinched some of the intro remarks I was going to make, but as I say, this is our finance test system that we've been using, as I say, for the last 5.5 weeks or so, and we've put around 1,000 tests against this environment to date. It's not been without defects, which you would expect, but we're working through those with colleagues from version 1 to make amendments. As I say, I've made the point about no live data. I'm intending to give you a flavour of how things will work in 2 key areas, and they're 2 key areas that we expect to be very, very far-flung in terms of accessibility when we go live, namely expenses, because once you've incurred expenses on university business, you'll be inevitably very keen to get them back as quickly as you can, and also requisitioning as the first part of the purchase to pay process, which will again be very widely available. So I'll take you through a typical expense claim and a typical requisition process. There will inevitably be questions that you will have, but it's really designed to give you a flavour. And as Charlotte's alluded to, the team, no, not my team, they don't belong to me, they belong to the university, but the team are in the front row here, front and second row. They are subject matter experts, very much more than I am. The problem with my job at the moment is you become a jack of all trades and a master of very little in my role. But I'll seek to take you through, and we'll answer questions at the end, if that's okay. So this is, if I can get it to the full screen, this is what the Oracle front screen looks like once you've logged in. There are a lot of tiles here. That is because for the purposes of testing and provision of access around the team at the moment, for that reason, I have got a very wide access at the moment. I think typically a typical user, if there is such a thing, will see far less than this. So it won't be quite as cluttered as this, but you get an idea of the look and feel. So I'm going to start with expenses in terms of how you go about submitting an expense claim, and expenses is provisioned under a tile that's called About Me, and the reason it's About Me is it's a capability that belongs to the employee role. So everybody in the university will be provisioned as an employee, and that's a role that exists in the Oracle system. Part of that is the ability to submit an expense claim, or as I'll show you in a moment, it's now called an expense report in Oracle terminology. So you're landed onto a front screen for expenses here, and I'll perhaps come back to that towards the end, because you can see if you've got multiple expense claims in progress or in flight at the moment, you can see how they're getting on in terms of the progress. But for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to create a new expense claim or a new expense report. So in terms of doing that, if I go to Actions and create an expense report. Now, an expense report is made up of a series, one or a number of expense items. First thing that you should do, though really, even though it's not currently a mandatory field in the test system, is give some idea of what the purpose of your expenses are. For this example, it's not sort of one single thing, it's a couple of items, so I'll put something fairly generic in there, and hopefully that would give ultimately the approver some idea of what you've done, and that will hopefully meet his or her expectations of what you should have been doing. In terms of the moving on to the sort of the guts of the expense claim, it's made up, as I said, from a number of expense items. So if you go down to the plus box there, it takes you in to create your first expense item. So a number of mandatory fields there down the left-hand side, as signified by the single asterisk. So it's got to be a value in each of those boxes. So firstly, what was the date upon which I incurred my expenses? So it's defaulted to a week ago, but let's say that it was actually the 5th of July when I incurred this particular expense. Expenses are driven from one or a number of templates which effectively drive the configuration of the expenses module. In the test system, we've got a couple of these because obviously we've been, to all intents and purposes, playing around with it for a while. But we've got a generic template called UAB expenses, and then we drop down to a list of expense types. Now these are common expense types that at the moment we've got configured in the test system that we're using specifically for that purpose. So in this example, I've spent 2.5 years doing new core, looking at screens, and so I think I need an eye test. It's an old classic. In terms of one or two of these boxes that have now appeared, now I've selected eye test as an expense type, probably worth dwelling on one or two of them. So as I keep saying, it's probably about the 12th time I've said it, this is a test system, and we're looking at this functionality at the moment, and there's a couple of items there just to bring out. The first, which will become an active button in a moment, is this itemise button. Now, this may not be relevant for all expense types, but for some it definitely will. So one which I remember from my EPS days is when we have to itemise particularly business entertainment and business social, that sort of thing, in terms of itemising individuals, so it gives you that sort of opportunity. But there are expense types where maybe the fields on the form or a receipt may not be enough to satisfy the repayment of the expense. So that's what the itemise button will be there for. And we've also got here a number of days. Now that won't be relevant in all cases, but for things like daily subsistence amounts or allowances, it will be of relevance. So we're just, as I say, testing these and playing around with them a little bit at the moment. So when I went for my eye test, it cost me, I don't know how much an eye test costs these days. I don't think I've ever had one, so I'll say £50, and it'll say that the reimbursable amount is £50, and there's a mandatory field here for a description, if I can spell correctly. So I've had an eye test at Specsavers. Some non-mandatory information, but the most important other things are the two down the right here. Firstly is you'll require a receipt for an awful lot of expenses, and the Oracle system will allow you to attach a receipt electronically. So if we've scanned that or taken a picture of it, so you've got it in a file format that we can work with, then we can click on that button there, and you can go away and browse files on your PC or on a directory to find it there. Strangely enough, I've got one prepared earlier. And strangely enough, it's called This is a Receipt. So if I click on that, go through the usual process, you can put a title and an additional description in if you require. And if I click on OK and cross my fingers, that will attach. So that's attached to your expense claim in the cloud. Now, having discussed with Caroline and payroll colleagues, there is no longer a requirement for hard copy receipts to be sent to payroll, as I think there is at the moment. Obviously, that's an awful lot of internal mail traffic, I think, is payroll expense receipts at the moment. They are happy as long as your scanned image or your photoed image is clear enough for them to see what it means and what it relates to. That is no longer a direct requirement for hard copy receipts to be attached to your expense claim. And then the final thing down on the bottom right here is to specify where it is that you'd like, or where it is you're suggesting, I suppose, that your expense claim should be paid from. And there are a couple of options: your an account code, a general ledger account code, or slightly different than it is now, a project number, which in a lot of cases will be a research project number. So for this particular one, we're just going to use the default account, and I'll show you a little bit of this functionality. Bear with me for a moment while I get rid of some of that. So this at the moment is the account code in our new chart of accounts, and I think that might be the subject of another town hall meeting, the chart of accounts. That will be an absolute ripper, so please sign up for that one. But I mean, you'll perhaps be thinking, how the hell's that coming onto the screen? How's the hell that's defaulted, really? So let me explain. So every individual, when they're set up as an employee, will have attached to them on their person record a default expense account code. So in my case, for example, strangely enough, the cost centre says finance office, and the activity and source of funds, without me explaining in vast detail what they are, is a sort of admin services and a general account default. So the analysis code up here, which is the equivalent of our coder element 1 at the moment, is being driven through from the expense type, which is eye-tests. So eye-tests as an expense type will drive that analysis code such that the accounting is driven to that particular analysis code. So we're hoping that quite a lot of this will be defaulted for the user, such that they don't have to spend an awful lot of time worrying about it, particularly if they're not familiar with the chart of accounts. Of course, these can be overridden if you're aware that your expense should come from a different activity or a different source of funds or whatever it should be, they can be overridden. But that's what the expenses account default is there to do. It's to provide a, if you like, a head start from where a considerable number of that individual's expenses would be paid from. But it can be overridden with here, or can be overridden by a project number if it's coming from, say, a research project. So we're okay on that. And really, in terms of the eye test part of what I'm doing, then that is it. I've got another aspect to my expense claim there. So in terms of the create another button there, we're creating another expense item, very much in similar vein than what we had before, but show you something slightly different in terms of the functionality. So on Tuesday last week, I incurred some car mileage. So a slightly different set of boxes will appear as a result of that. They're asking me what the distance of my trip was. So in this particular case, a couple of 100 miles, I went in my car. So hopefully, when I click on the calculate button, it's stored the fact it's 40p a mile, and it's telling me that I should be claiming £80 back. That's right, isn't it? I think. Yeah. We'll ask for a description and also a start and end location. So went up to Newport trip, Birmingham to Manchester. Have I spelled that right? No, I haven't. I know it doesn't matter, but I get a bit OCD. Return. So Birmingham, Manchester. So giving information that you would otherwise put on an expenses form at the moment, potentially where they're still in use. As far as receipts are concerned, not expecting a receipt for car mileage necessarily. So you'll see in a moment when I complete this expense claim, if there are documents missing, it will flag on that there are documents missing. It won't stop you proceeding necessarily, but it will flag the documents missing. But on car mileage, because it's not expecting a receipt, it won't make that flag. Again, I'll just get rid of this project information, and I'll just show you a slight difference, hopefully, in the account coding. Why has that box come up? It's not making me feel good at all. So what it's done there is it's driven out a different analysis code for the car mileage than it did for the eye test. So it's driven out travel and subsistence code. So it's categorising that expense in a different way and in the correct way, we hope. So we'll OK that, and I will save that expense claim. We'll save that. And that should take me back to the front screen there, where you'll see that I've got two expense items, one for an eye test, one for mileage, totting up to £130. So I'm in a position now to submit that for approval by my line manager. It's the expectation with expenses. But before that, I have to tick that I've accepted our expense policies as the university. So it's effectively a form of signature onto that says, yes, I've read and accepted the travel and expense policies, which I must admit I haven't done for a year or two, but I'm suggesting that I have, and that can then be submitted for the next stage of the process, which, as I say, is an approval from the line manager. It's telling me that my expense report has submitted for approval, and you can actually print out a PDF copy of that if you want to retain it for your records. So that will go, as I say, to your line manager. Beyond that, ultimately it will be paid through accounts payable to you, to your bank account, the same bank account that you get your salary paid into. It's worth noting that as part of the Oracle functionality, we've got certain audit reports and audit routines that we can run on expenses, which will be in the gift of colleagues in payroll. So they will run checks as well, and having some of the expense policy sort of configured into the system will assist with that. So as I mentioned at the start, we've got, you can tell I've been practicing before I came here, really, to make sure there as slick as it could be. So I've got at the moment various expense claims on the go in my name, and you can see those and see where they are. So the ones I've submitted to date are all at the moment pending manager approval. And I think once you get that manager approval, I think there'll be sort of pending payment or process for payment. Yeah. So that status will change, and you'll be able to see where you are with any one of those. So that is a very brief overview of the expenses functionality as it stands at the moment. Don't think on my script there's anything. I mentioned the dashboard and the progress there, and you can drill down to those and remind yourself of what it was that you were claiming. Okay. I'll take questions at the end. I'm sure you've got some, but I'll take questions at the end because I just want to dash on to the requisitioning piece at the moment and spend about an equal amount of time on that, and then I say we will take questions towards the end if that's okay. So, requisitioning. So, outset of the P2P process, requisitioning goods and services. So, unsurprisingly, it's found under the procurement tab, and as I say again, this will be a capability that's provisioned to all employees under the employee role, so everyone will have the opportunity to become a requisitioner. Excuse me, slightly dry mouth with all you here. So under purchase requisitions, you again land on a front screen there under requisitions, which similar look and feel to what we've just seen in expenses, but obviously some obvious differences, but the look and feel is not dissimilar. What I'm going to show you this afternoon is how to do what you call a non-catalogue requisition. So the first thing to explain to you, and Karen, when I spoke to her about this last week, was keen that I explained it, is first obvious question is, how do I know that what I'm buying is on a catalogue or is not on a catalogue? Which is obviously a very fair question. Ultimately, what we will have is catalogues available for colleagues to browse as part of the requisitioning process. And you may be unsurprised to see that the obvious one, which is being retained by the university, Science Warehouse. So Science Warehouse will interface to our requisitioning system for you to go in there and for you to browse and see whether what you want is in that catalogue. And obviously many of you will already be aware what is available and what isn't available through Science Warehouse, but we thought it was worth just showing you that obviously, you know, underneath that shop by category link there is the Science Warehouse catalogue. But we've perhaps established that what we need isn't in the catalogue, and so therefore we are heading off down the route of raising a non-catalogue item. Okay, so probably a couple more screens and a couple more steps to this than there was in expenses. So I'll rattle through them as we've got it currently configured on the test environment. So in terms of item type, we can have goods or services billed by amounts or by quantities. In this case, we'll have something by quantity, and we'll have a desk and a what have I done there? Apologies. You know when you thought something like this might happen? Right, desk and a chair for my office, and I'm sure you could get that from a catalogue before anybody shouts it out, but and we're looking to establish what the purchasing category is, which will allow the university to collect information on what it's procuring, what it buys, but also will drive out some of the accounting for where this piece of procurement will eventually be charged. So what we've got is a considerable number, thanks to Karen's efforts, of purchase categories mapped from unspec codes, which will make sense to particularly those of you in the procurement space. And we're pretty sure that this will exist somewhere under office furniture, and indeed it does. So we select a procurement category. We've got a number of units of measure at the moment configured into the system. We know that people buy stuff in bags, in cases, in kilograms, or whatever it might be, but in this case I think a desk and chair is probably each. And we're expecting to pay, let's say, £200 for that. A couple of coughs in the audience, perhaps that's cheap or expensive, I don't know. Couple of things to say when it comes to supplier. So who do we want to supply this goods for us? We've got some options here. So the first option is you could leave it blank. So you want a desk and a chair, but you're not bothered who it comes from. So you could leave it blank, you could request it blank, and then when the order's built, colleagues will, suggest a supplier, suggest an approved or a framework supplier. We can say, actually, we'd like to request the use of a new supplier. So we know that there's a fantastic office furniture shop just opened down in Selly Oak, and we want to start using them because they're, he's a great guy, he offers me a good deal. He's not currently on the supplier list, and we could request a new supplier. Karen's scowling at me there. We could request a new supplier for whatever reason. That, I think, would head off down a different route to colleagues in procurement, and they would assess whether we should be or shouldn't be using that supplier and whether they should be added to the list. Or we can search for an existing supplier on our list. And as this as we have no imagination in the new core team, we've got a number of suppliers called supplier. Let's pick supplier 6. And that drags through some information about them in terms of their supplier site. We can have suppliers with, as you can imagine, with multiple sites. And we've got a contact there, Ian Rush. And he's a Welshman, he probably won't be wanting England to win, but never mind. So we've, as I say, put a description of what we'd like. We've got a suggested or nominated supplier. So very much in the, I suppose, Amazon style, we are adding that to our cart. Okay, so we've added that. As part of this requisition, we'll have something else in my office. I'm feeling in a good mood. We'll feel like having a printer for my office. Again, we're searching for a procurement category, and we reckon that we'll find one under there. So something like printer and fax and photocopying supplies looks like the most obvious one there. Again, I think we just want one. We don't want to be too greedy. And again, it's coming in each. And we're perhaps thinking, I don't know, £300 for that, not 3,000. And this time, just to show you it goes through, as I say, I'm, as the requester at the moment, and subject to any approval and everything like that, I'm pretty ambivalent to where I'm getting this from, so we'll put that through without a supplier attached to it, just to show you that that is also a reasonable way to proceed. So in my cart at the moment, I've got, what have I got? A desk and a chair and a printer at the moment. But before I can go on to submit that again for the requisite approval and any future stages, I need to go in and review that, because there's a couple of additional pieces of information that we'll need to submit in order to get that through in a timely fashion. So it's taken me to a screen there where I'm editing the requisition, and it's been dragged through here. There's 2 requisition lines as part of the document that I've created, one for 200, one for 300 there. Now if I highlight each of those in turn, then the desk and chair's already highlighted. It's asking me for certain information there which will assist with the building ultimately of the purchase order. So I can say, is it urgent? What's a requested delivery date? Quite an important one is where I'd like it delivered to. So it's come up with a default University of Birmingham, but I think the chap who's delivering this might struggle to find me if I just provide him with that sort of information. So we'll go in and we will search for a more relevant delivery location, and we've got, as I say, again only in the test system at the moment, probably 300 or 400 delivery locations currently loaded, which have been taken largely from Proactis and then cleansed for the purposes of doing the testing. And we'll continue to look at those as we go forward before we go live. So if I search for Finan, you'll see there's a couple of delivery locations, potential delivery locations that have come up with finance at the start of the name. And let's say we'll get this one delivered to finance office to the payroll counter. I'm sure they'll be delighted with that. But it provides a delivery location which will ultimately go out onto the order to the supplier. In similar vein to the expenses, we need to understand where we're going to charge it to, or where we're suggesting or suggesting that the payment to the supplier should eventually be charged to. And again, reasonable amount of this has already been pre-populated. So again, the category item has driven out the analysis code for the desk and chair in terms of furniture, but again it's picked up defaults that belong to me and my employee record. But again, these can be overwritten if they're not correct, and that's not the source of budget that you want ultimately the goods to be charged to. But I think we're okay from that for the time being. And perhaps one down here, I don't know whether we've got colleagues from MDS in the audience at all. This box down here in terms of intended use will be of interest there, which is where we are particularly capturing those items where we're looking to claim a VAT relief for medical research. So that intended use box there will drive out that and the process behind that, which we expect will allow us to claim that the relevant VAT relief there for medical research. Okay, it's just worth you being aware of that, such that you're at least satisfied that we haven't forgotten about it. Similar process with the second requisition line. Important that we do this, because I think obviously we've got a nominated supplier for the first line, but obviously no supplier for the second line. If the supplier for line 2 is different from the supplier for line 1, it will generate obviously 2 orders. So we'll need to make sure that the delivery location is also specified for each of the items. So again, we'll just get that delivered to the finance office, and the accounting again will drive the analysis and drive the expenditure code from the category item, and again can be overridden if there's a requirement to do so. So I've been through a process of stating what it is I want, who I'd like to supply it if that's relevant, where I'd want it delivered to, and some accounting information that's required there. So when I submit this, rather than going to the line manager, I think with requisitions they'll go to a colleague, and it could be the same colleague who's got a budgetary responsibility, but it could be a different individual, and then it will go off to finance colleagues for building the order, and then through the process all the way through to payments for the payment of the supplier. So if I submit that, I'll get a confirmation that requisition was submitted. Again, I can view a PDF. Am I feeling brave? Yes, go on. I'm feeling brave enough to click the button. Karen's nodding at me, so it's going to be okay. Oh dear. It usually pops up at the bottom of my screen back in the office. There we go. And if you need to, you can see a printed copy. I know it's very much in, got the Oracle livery on it now rather than the new OB, but some of the branding is still being worked upon. and you will be able to, if you want to, see or print a copy of that, but not a particular requirement. But say you can see supplier 6 there, no supplier there for the printer, and the status now I've submitted it and it's gone through is pending approval at the next stage from the budget manager relevant to the cost centre. So it'll be in my case a finance office budgetary colleague with budgetary approval capability in the system. So I've submitted that, happy, hoping it gets approved because I'd like my new office furniture. Again, a little bit similar to what we saw with the expenses. If you're a colleague who will be doing, a reasonably significant number of requisitions, you can see the ones that you've got in flight at the moment. So again, in preparing for this, I've done quite a few. Funnily enough, I've got a lot of desks and chairs and office furniture, but there we go. A number of them are pending approval, and you can see that. I think if you click on pending approval, you should be able to see the route it should be taking through to approval. So at the moment in the test system, we haven't got names here, but ultimately you might be able to see that. So in my case, if Sarah's holding the budget that I would like to requisition my goods from, then it will say, Sarah Wright, awaiting approval there. So you can see where it's at in the process, put quite crudely. But on the screen there, you can see the status of certainly your recent activities in these areas and where it has all got up to. Okay, that is about half an hour, just about. We want to leave a reasonable amount of time for questions. I'm more than appreciative of the fact that what I've covered there has just been a very helicopter view of those two particular processes, but hopefully it's given you some sort of idea of how they would work and a look and feel of how the system will operate. Okay, yeah?
Okay, so I think you'll agree that it's pretty intuitive. It's got a lot of drop-down menus. I think it forms a logical process. But it is a demonstration. I'm sure it's driven out lots of questions. So hands up for those who've got a question to ask. I've got 2 roving mics just up there in the red. This. Chris up there in the red. Turn it up.
Yeah, I can't. Sorry, I can't.
I can't hear.
How many layers of approval would we be able to add into each budget? Because although I'm approving, checking how much money the budget does have, I may not be the supervisor that knows that student should be ordering that laptop or item. See if there's enough money for that laptop to be bought, should they be buying it, and only the supervisors know, and I can't email the supervisors for every single item they may buy or try and buy.
So I mean, each sort of budget or cost centre will. I mean, there will be various layers of approval based on limits, in terms of financial limits, and also based on the nature of what you're procuring. So hazardous or radioactive and that sort of stuff will go down a different approval route. But I think we will have basically financial layers of approval as agreed with colleagues in procurement, which I think aren't fundamentally changing.
That was another way.
No. So I suppose if you've got we're expecting there'll be approval pools per cost centre. So is it the volume that you're concerned about, particular?
Yeah, because at the moment in practice, I'm the main person that approves ICS purchases orders. There's also other people in that pool that sometimes get ahead of me, just because there's other people in there, but I'm the one that should be looking at it. but also...
I mean, I'm not being funny, but it begs the question whether your practice pool is right, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's one of the historic issues with it, but hopefully this will sort it. But it's more the supervisor sometimes come back to me and say, oh, I approved the laptop, but it costs more than you should have ordered it for.
Right.
But unless they're in that approval stage before me, they don't have a chance to stop it before it gets to me and I say, oh, there's enough money in there.
Right.
It's whether or not we can adapt it as we go along. Will we be able to have more than...
I think it might come down to how we can set up the approval pool in your area and having set up the approval in your area. So obviously, as we get close to go live, because there's inevitably a turnover of colleagues who are approvers, you know, as we go forward just through the natural sort of run of events, we'll just have to make sure that the approvals in your area are how you want them to be, really. So we'll be, you know, collecting some of that data that we've already got and probably validating it with each of the schools, the colleges, and the professional services to make sure that we've got the right people in the right places. Hi.
One of my questions is about the delivery address.
Yeah.
That it drops down with UOB. Predominantly orders that I would do are for students who have disabilities or other specific needs.
Yeah.
And we have to get either specialist equipment for them or pay for one-to-one support, etc. But particularly in the case of the equipment, because we're ordering the equipment, the university's paying for it, but obviously it's being delivered to the student's address, it's not being delivered to the university.
Right.
So will we have the availability to actually change that address?
How would you deal with it now?
With it now, we actually put on the purchase order that is done. We do a purchase order request to the professional services procurement hub.
Yeah.
And they do the order on Proactis.
Yes.
But prior to that, when I did the orders on Proactis, we just put on it, please deliver to students, please contact the student, their name and contact number or email, and arrange delivery to their address and put that on, because obviously we've obtained the student's permission for that to be done before we
No, that's fine.
But it's not to be delivered here.
No, that's fine, because it's not required here. So, well, the first person who's put a new one on me, because that's not one I was aware of, but I'm... No, that's fine.
Yeah, I was going to, if I could check.
Please do.
I was going to say, on the delivery location at the moment, as you rightly pointed out, what we've tried to do is take the existing delivery locations, cleanse them down to something much more suitable, because we've got multiple delivery locations which are the same. There is the option to override the delivery location, but there's also the option for us to produce a report and start looking at why are we delivering to locations that ain't set up in the system. So I believe there will be some flexibility to deliver to free text, and there will be some auditing or reporting behind this just to make sure things are going to the right place.
Yeah.
That is the expectation, so it's something we will test in testing and pick up to make sure that free text field is there.
On top
Okay.
of that, you might have seen there was a kind of comments thing that notes to supplier and things like that.
Yeah.
You can actually also attach and add notes that then maybe go out with the order to the supplier.
Thanks.
There's one up. Chris? Oh. Gentleman up there next.
Thank you very much. I order a lot of audio-visual equipment for the next theatres. Some of these orders can have 30, 40 lines on them, normally from one supplier. I noticed that you have to put a delivery address for each line. Can you do globally? So
You can do global delivery addresses, yeah. I think what I was showing there was because my requisition would end up being 2 orders, because I'd got a supplier on one and not on the other, but yes.
So you just raise one order, point the item, and then point the item, and the
Yeah.
item in person. That's it. Thank you.
All right.
Hello.
Oh, yeah.
I was just wondering, will internal orders be on the same side of requisition, or is that going to be something separate?
Internal orders. The same, yeah.
The same?
Yeah, I was just looking for confirmation. I was about to blurt out, oh, it'll be the same, but yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, it's still, we're still, under development, under testing in terms of internal orders, internal catalogues, that sort of thing. But yes, the style will be as you've just seen.
Brilliant, thank you.
Chris, that's here.
I know we've been shown about staff expenses. We also deal with non-staff expenses. So, is there sort of plans for? We have to do a lot of expenses for students.
Yeah, students, postgraduate students, I think, are going to come on as a type of employee, so that should mitigate some of that. Purely non-staff, I'm afraid there's not a solution in Oracle for purely non-staff. We toyed with the idea of trying to build a forms-based system that integrated with Oracle, but it was going to prove very difficult from a security point of view, particularly where we're collecting bank details. To make sure that they were going to be as secure as they would have to be if we were going to be doing that. It's something that's on probably my post-day one wish list, but we know that other universities with Oracle software have been battling with this, and in fact, I don't think I'm betraying any confidences here, UCL had a project to try and deliver this because they're also an Oracle Finance university, and they had to abandon it because they couldn't find a way of doing it. So at the moment, the non-staff expenses will have to stay broadly as they are at the moment, I'm afraid.
Okay.
But students, particularly postgraduate students, as I say, will become a type of employee on the system because a lot of, particularly in these science medical colleges, a lot of postgraduate students requisition. So they would go through similar, requisition, particularly onto the research grants on which they work. So if they've got effectively an employee access, they can raise expenses in the way that I've shown and go through a process like that if they have an employee role effectively. But non-staff, I'm afraid we are where we are. But we have considered it, and it's something we would have liked to do. But there was a few too many constraints on it, particularly to get us live for February.
Okay, thank you.
One here.
I was thinking about the science warehouse. So we haven't encouraged to use the science warehouse first, and if they don't find the item, to use the non-catalog. So is there a preference, and why is that? And just purchasing from non-catalog, it is a bit of a time costing, and I sometimes consider less cost effective. So we have to search. Also the price, is the price range we're looking to buy, for instance, office furniture, or is this the price we've seen an item somewhere on the internet and we wanted that particular item?
Yeah.
I think
you've highlighted a weakness of my demonstration, unfortunately, and I'm going to creep back under my rock now and look very sad. I think where we've obviously got our relationship with Science Warehouse, and they are holding Birmingham catalogues on our behalf. They are those suppliers that engage with Science Warehouse are our approved suppliers, and the catalogues that they are holding there are our approved prices for the goods that they are showing. So I think the encouragement should be to go to the catalogue first, and then only if you can't find what's on the catalogue, go to the non-catalogue option I've shown. And obviously there's a multitude of stuff that we buy that will still be non-catalogue, but Science Warehouse first would be the advice from procurement colleagues.
And I think we can outline this in our training.
Yeah.
When we get there, so it will become clear.
And I also have another question, please, about the urgent button there, which sometimes can, and most of the times incur additional charges.
Yeah.
So everybody wants something urgent, which obviously could be the next day. Is there a chance of having a drop down like delivery days or the lead time is different for different items?
I think.
Manager approving.
Yeah.
So for and tick the button urgent or delivery days.
No, I mean, I think we'd have to go back and have a look at that one. I mean, obviously the urgency there is really to communicate from the requisitioner to the order creator that there is an urgency around this, that actually there's something we desperately need tomorrow for a particular experiment or something that's going to, you know, cause us a particular problem. So it's really just a method of communicating really from one party to the next person in the process, that there is an urgency around this, rather than, you know, it'll be fine in a week's time. So it's really just for that purpose, really. All right.
Hi. So
Hello again.
quick question. In terms of the non-staff forms, that's the majority of what I get hold of in terms of the bulk of the forms coming through. Most of you are good and putting them on the tracks already. Will the forms be streamlined, made better? Are we going to be able to PDF and send them direct to payroll rather than continuing the post? Sorry, and also
No, that's fine. I mean, the non-staff one, actually we can look at, because as part of I think what we're going to do pre-go live is obviously, you know, an awful lot of training, but there's no reason why we can't pick up as part of the training and some of the communication, the distribution of information to everybody, is reaffirm some of the existing processes or processes that aren't going to change in quite the same way as these will. So yeah, we'll take that away and have a look at the non-staff. I wouldn't want to make any promises without colleagues from payroll having been sat down and talked to about how it would work and what the potential for the process improvement is there, regardless of the fact that it may not be captured by the system in the same way as some of the stuff that I've shown you. So yeah, we can take that one away and talk to them and come back to you about what the thinking is there. That's fine.
Thank you. And the non-catalogue aspects of the requisition system, is that essentially going to replace the poured forms that we have already, because you can put through anything in there in terms of goods, services?
Replace the
Poured forms. We have that in there.
poured forms.
Yes.
Oh, written forms. Yes. So yes, sorry, misunderstood you for a moment there. So yes, I mean, I think we'd regard this as replacing any form, paper form or Word document or anything that's circulating around the university at the moment that effectively acts as a requisition. So yes, I mean, I think we'd want that all to be dragged on system, and that's one of the central tenets of what we're trying to do in terms of streamlining the process, is bring everything onto the system, reduce the amounts of emails and paperwork and other sort of communication methods of communication that are used in that way at the moment.
This one down here first.
Sometimes we have to source quotes first of all for something that we're buying non-catalogue.
Yeah.
Will there be somewhere within the system that we can attach electronically the quote?
Yes, I think it was on one of the screens that I didn't dwell very long on, Joe, to be honest.
Okay.
If I haven't been timed out here, then I think, I don't know if I can get to it, but there was underneath where I'd specified the delivery address and the accounting information. Am I on the right screen, Karen? That was lucky. Then I think there is definitely a space for attachments underneath on that screen. It was just I didn't dwell on it very long. So a little bit in the same way that I attached the receipt to the expenses. There's a box there to pick that up. So if you've got it stored on your desktop or stored in on your computer somewhere, then you can pick that up and attach it.
And again, depending on the amount, do you have to have 3 quotes still, as we do at the moment?
Yeah, I mean that's down to procurement, not down to the system.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was, obviously with very large amounts, they're looking for a lot of supporting information to when you put your purchase order on. Will that just be the same thing again, just attach supporting information?
I think so. I mean, obviously with very major purchases, you still expect to contact your local friendly procurement advisor for all their professional for all your their sort of professional stuff. So in a lot of these, particularly when you're buying sort of major things, the sort of 25k plus stuff that I know a lot of guys deal with, then obviously you'd expect there to have been some significant process almost before you get to this point, because not denigrating this at all, but as I say, this is more on the sort of day-to-day side in some senses, but obviously it doesn't replace the professional procurement process that we've already got.
Hi. I was just going to ask, in terms of the expenses,
Yeah.
is there going to be capability in the system for somebody to put in an expense on somebody else's behalf? I was just thinking of the academics. If they were
We strongly recommend people do their own expenses. I mean, the other, you know, sorry, it's MD gets flippant again. Sort of answer that was, but I think so. To be honest, at the moment, they're either filling a form, or they're sending an email, or they're basically doing something to foist it onto somebody else that they could probably just easily do on there, and that is probably not always going to be the easiest sell that I'm ever going to have to make. But it doesn't just go for academic colleges, it goes for everybody really. So we are recommending very, very strongly that people do their own expenses.
Any other questions?
Expenses again, sorry. Just a quick one. You showed the PDF, what you put was pending approval. Will we be able to get, see the PDF when it's approved? Because we have to keep a record of those on case notes and things for students with support.
Right.
So are we able to go back in and access that once it's approved?
I can't see any. I'm not sure I've tested that. I'm not sure you. I don't believe you shouldn't. Certainly should be able to see a PDF, because at any stage you should be able to generate a PDF of a document. And I assume it would go from pending approval to processed for payment, and then maybe paid afterwards for a while. So I think you'll probably see the same thing, just with one description box having changed from pending to approved, or approved to processed for payment, something like that. But yeah, because you'll be able to drag PDF copies of most documents out of the system. Yeah.
Just on expenses again, you said that expenses approval will default to line manager, but the line manager isn't necessarily the budget holder. Will there be another level of approval for the budget holder to approve?
No. I think the way we're thinking about it, at the moment is we would expect the majority of colleagues to have incurred an expense having previously cleared it with their line manager. Right.
But, yeah, that's not going to
all right. Okay. I think the other way of looking at it is colleague has claimed their expenses. I might be going where angels fear to tread here now, but colleague has claimed their expenses. How frequently do we decline them?
we do decline them.
Frequently.
It depends where they're claiming it from. So they might be claiming off multiple budgets. So this is where it becomes more difficult. So there might be multiple people involved in those budgets.
Funnily enough, I was having this conversation. We were partly having this conversation with the directors of operations yesterday, and I wasn't sure I managed to convince them either, to be honest. So, I think the other thing is obviously so let me talk about an office I know, which is finance office. So we've got sort of multiple, so I suppose layers of management, and the budget holders may be Erica, as it is now, and perhaps her members of her management team who will have the direct management budgetary responsibility. I suppose the danger is that they will get potentially quite a number of these expense claims to approve, but won't necessarily be as close enough to the detail to know why it was incurred, what the purpose was. So it may be in that case more appropriate for the line manager to approve it. So it's what HR are doing to feed into the HR part of the system is detailed line management structures, which are going to be different necessarily from those who have overt budgetary responsibility. And I think we just felt during some of the workshops that we had around this that it was line manager felt more appropriate than necessarily budgetary, the colleague with budgetary responsibility as far as expenses. When it comes to requisitions and that sort of stuff, then absolutely it's the colleague with the budgetary responsibility.
So for example, on projects,